video, let's take an updated look at the pose tool inside of 3D Coat. It resides in the voxel sculpting room, and you can not only use it to pose characters, but to do a lot of the same modeling functions you would find in a typical 3D application, such as Maya, 3D Studio Max, Cinema 4D, Lightwave, Modo, and so on. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. We're going to go ahead and just pose a portion of the character, and then I'll try to show a sample where you might use it in a typical modeling setting. So what I tend to do is cache the layer so that I have a lower resolution proxy. As you may know, I'm going to zoom in here, and as you may know in other applications, the lower the polygon count, the better the deformation speed or performance tends to be. It's no different in 3D Coat, and it's really no different in any sculpting applications. So where you would step down in subdivision levels in another sculpting application, you do that in 3D Coat by going to the voxel menu, proxy visualization, and what this is it's allowing you to step down these different levels, okay, in your poly count. What 3D Coat will do is when you cache a given layer, clicking on this third little, or I should say this fourth icon here, as soon as you hover over it, you'll see it. Okay, as soon as you move it away, it's gone. So when you click on that, 3D Coat will take this original layer, this original object, and store it in a cache file on your hard drive, and in its place it will leave you a lower resolution version of this object. Now you could actually choose not to even have a proxy left behind if you so choose. Now what you have here is a reduction of 3 levels and a decimation of 4 different levels. And I won't go into that in great detail. There's another video that covers the difference between reduction and decimation. Sorry about that. So yeah, as you can see, when I zoom in, typically, especially when I'm in volume mode, 3D Coat will generally try to spread the polygon distribution evenly. Okay, when you decimate though, it's different. It will try to disperse the polygonal density in flat areas where it doesn't necessarily need it, and in areas where you have a sharp angle, such as, you know, muscle creases and things of that sort, it's going to try to give you a higher degree of polygonal density. So in a sense you have local tessellation. Okay, I'll just demonstrate that very quickly. Again, I don't want to go into this in too great detail because there are other videos that cover this, but I already have a decimation of, I'll go with 4 levels. Now you can assign hotkeys. I assigned my arrow keys, the bottom row, to these reduction levels. That way I don't have to continuously go here in this menu to reach it. You can also toggle, you know, basically go in cache state and uncache it here as well, toggle proxy mode. So you can assign a hotkey for that. I assigned my up arrow key for this very purpose. So knowing what I already have assigned, I can choose to reduce or decimate this model. Right now it's set on decimate, so I'm going to go ahead and cache. And you can see the decimation is a more complex algorithm, so it's going to take a bit longer than reduction. Now where this is good, oops. Where this is good as opposed to reduction is if you want to leave parts of your scene cached while you're working on something else. For example, if I'm working on armor or something, I don't necessarily need you know, these other layers soaking up a lot of system resources unnecessarily. And what I mean by that is you know, the the poly count, the more RAM it's going to take up. And also, if you look in the lower left-hand corner, you'll notice your frames per second. Your graphic card has to process a lot more information as well. So the lower the poly count throughout your scene, the better as far as overall performance. Okay, so that's one reason why you may want to decimate many of your layers while you're working on something else. So with that in mind, the difference between reduction and decimation in a nutshell is that decimation will try, even though it's lowered significantly, it will try again to give you enough tessellation in the areas where it needs it, so it will look as close to the original model as possible. Also, if you have very thin objects such as wings or clothing, things of that sort, when you reduce the model down, because of even distribution, you may get a really rough looking result. So if I hit the 4 key, you can see even though it's been decimated, it's still very close to the original object in appearance anyway. So I'll go ahead and uncache that, and you can see very little difference visually. So now what I'm going to do is hit my hotkeys for reduction. I'll hit my middle, the one on the bottom, which is 4 levels of reduction, and I'll hit my up arrow key to toggle into proxy mode, and you can see it changed on the fly. And you can notice the detail that's now missing. Okay, and if I zoom in and hit the 4 key, now you can see how it's evenly distributed throughout the model. And so this may be fine for whatever you're doing, and it's also very fast getting in and out. So let's go ahead and work with this. I want to scroll down under Adjust, and you'll see the Pose tool. And I have in the Tool Options panel a number of different selection types. Now, I want to point out while I'm at it that line, ring, and sphere, as well as select object, works best when you're using just these brush types, okay? And the reason for it is you're making a selection from one area to the other. If you're using maybe like a freeform lasso, I'll just demonstrate that. Let's say a line. You see it doesn't quite work. I'm confusing 3D codes. So if I switch to a pen, just a regular one of these first 4 or 5, and now make the selection, you can see I'm going to turn off freeform for now, but you can see it made that selection globally, and that may not be what I want. I can go back in with select with pen and deselect certain areas, okay, but I'm going to go ahead and clear selection, okay, and I'm also going to turn symmetry off. I'll hit the S key to bring the symmetry panel up underneath my cursor. I can also access it from the menu here. Alright, I'll hit the S key again and turn symmetry off. The reason for this is I'm going to just work on one side and show how you can use SamCopy to mirror the change over to the other side. Okay, so now that we're ready to start, I'm going to choose select with pen, and this is going to allow me, I can go in and brush select an area. In this case I don't want to do that. I want to use freeform selection, and I want to make sure before I do anything, and when I want to select all the way through, okay, I need to make sure ignore back faces is unchecked, okay, because if I don't, it's only going to allow me to access what the camera can see. So I can move this out of the way. I'm just going to grab this little, grab the apex here, hit escape because I accidentally started a line already. So anyway, I'm going to just kind of drag select. I can use smooth pose selection, Okay, I'm going to clear selection. Another option, you can crank up your fall off. Okay, quite a bit, and maybe bump the border width, and so this gives you a bit more anti-aliasing, so we can crank that up quite a bit. Now if you like this and you use these settings, you can go into your presets and create a specific pose preset. Okay, it will memorize the type of tool that I have. Okay, it'll also memorize the border width. It will memorize the fall off, all these settings. So let's do that now. I'm going to modify this so I can get to my little drop list. Add preset. Okay, so now I can just double click this, pose, let's say pin, soft, 01. Okay, so I can quickly get to this type of selection in the future. So with that done, let's go ahead and try this. And you can see I didn't even have to do the smooth pose because of the adjustments that I made. Okay, so I can switch to a different pin type and go in and hold the shift key and smooth it even further. Now if you do not work on a lower resolution proxy, even the selection or the smoothing may be a bit slower. Okay, so I think we're good. And I'm going to now move this anchor here, or the pivot point, and I can use these specific align to certain axes along the X, the Y, or the Z. Go X, and I can quickly just align it that way. Okay, and can now repose this. I can also use a freeform deformation cage. You can choose how many control points I want. In this case I'll choose 4x4. Choose directional fit. It'll try to take its best guess, and I'll click transform the entire lattice. And so what that allows me to do is, before making any deformations, I can readjust this cage to fit. Okay, and I'm using the rotation handles here. You get move, and you can scale it along an axis or globally if you like. Okay. You can also use this little ring here to rotate in space or according to screen space. Okay. Maybe squeeze this in just a bit. Okay. Alright, so with that done, I can uncheck this now, and I can go in and select and move edges, faces, or individual points with a pen selection. But if I go in and choose one of these selection types, okay, I can drag select this way. I like to use freeform lasso. And now, as you may notice, let's say if I wanted to rotate the wrist, I'm going to have a problem because the pivot point is right here centered in the middle of the hand. So there's a couple ways to modify this pivot position. You can check move only gizmo, position it, and when you're done, uncheck that. Or to make it even faster, you can hold the shift key, which will do the same thing, but it'll prevent you from having to go back and forth, and so on. So I'll hold the shift key, move it, and when I'm done, I just let go of the shift key, and now I can make my transformation. Okay, let's say if I want to rotate the wrist a bit. Okay, and I'll do the same thing here. Okay, let's see. I'm going to hold the shift key, move that back to the wrist. And drag select this bottom row here. Okay, and let's say I wanted to bulge the biceps a bit. Let's try an odd selection like this. Okay, can do the same thing for the shoulder. And when I'm relatively happy, I can just uncheck that box there, and I can clear selection. I can choose a different type here. Sphere is always good. It's like a quick soft selection on the fly. You can drag from the center point, and again I need to switch to a regular pen for this purpose. Let me get that out of the way for a second. And so it's going to apply a gradient, solid to a gradient. I'm going to click on this little switch transform handle, and you can see the mode changes. So this would be very similar to using your your move, rotate, or scale tools inside of 3D Studio Max, Maya, and so on. So I can move it globally, undo, or I can move it along a specific axis here. Okay, so in this case I'll just move it up a bit, and I can use the ring tool here. I'm going to clear selection, and what it's going to do is between point A and point B it's going to be solid and apply a gradient in each direction. So I'll click here in the wrist area, okay, and I'm going to change the transform type to kind of a global scale. I can scale along this axis here. I can bring that up a little bit further. And again, just try to scale it down a bit. Okay. So the select with object just allows you to, if you have multiple objects, you can just quickly select the entire thing instead of having to use a lasso or something. So once done, if you're relatively happy with it, clear selection now, and get out of the tool by just selecting another tool. And now I'll uncache and hit my S key to turn the symmetry back on. And there are a couple ways to do this. I could hover over and hit the H key. And generally the H key, when you're hovering over an object, it will pick that particular object. But now, when I hit sim copy, wherever my cursor was, it will pick that side. I could also, I'll undo that. I could also pick this side by holding the shift key with smooth and just quickly tap the side that I want to copy from and hit the sim copy icon as well. Okay, you can also access sim copy here in the voxel menu. You can assign a hotkey for that if you like, and just toggle it when you need. Alright, so you can further tweak the result with the move tool. Again, this works better if you're working on your proxy, but if it's not too high poly, it may be sufficient without it. Okay, so with that done, I can hide this, and I want to create a new layer. I want to show some modeling functions using the pose tool. So I will hit the increase resolution button or icon at the bottom of the panel, or I could access it at the very bottom under commands. I could click res plus. It's the same function. I could also, if I have an object already stored on this layer, I could click to resample it and arbitrarily tell 3D Coat how much to go up or down. So again, I'll go ahead and increase, and I'll go to my models palette. I'm going to use just a barrel from a rifle to use as a good example. Okay, and with symmetry on, I don't need that at this point in time, so I'll turn that off. And let me scale this up a bit. And I'll hit apply, or I could hit the enter key. And what you see in white is this is essentially a kind of a container, like a little proxy object. 3D Coat will fill it with voxels. It's asking, did I want to maintain the initial scale, even though I've thereafter scaled it up inside the viewport. It's asking, do I want to keep that initial scale upon export. So with that done, to get rid of this white proxy object, if you are done, if you don't want to make any more copies or bring in any more objects, you can just choose another tool, and it's gone. And there you have your object. What I'll do now is go to an orthographic view. You can toggle this here. You can also hit the 5 key on your number pad to do this. You can access your different views. In this case, I'll go to front view. Zoom in a bit. And go to a pose tool. I want to select ring. So let's say I wanted to create some grooves here. I can click, and again it's going to be solid in the middle and create a gradient toward the edges. Now I can quickly align this in the Y. if I'm in an orthographic view, it tends to center this up for me, so that's why I tend to use orthographic, just as I would in a standard 3D modeling application. Anytime you want to do precise type of operations like this, you don't want perspective skewing your selection. So I'm going to do a global scale inward. I can now quickly align the handle along the x-axis and scale it along this axis alone. And you can see I can get some interesting effects that way. Okay, and I can also just use select with pen and go in and make a hard edge selection. I want to clear that selection. There we go. I'm going to bring my border width back down to the default 3. I can bring the fall off down. I'll reselect again. Along the Y. Make a global selection, or a global scale outward. Okay, so I think that will pretty much conclude this demonstration of the pose tool in 3D Coat, and hope you get comfortable with this tool, because it's essentially your Swiss Army knife in the voxel sculpting tool set. Thank you for watching.